right, so hello and welcome all to the October 2025 CLaN seminar. My name is Dr. Alex Stevenson. I'm the Director of Research at Northern New South Wales Local Health Districts. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Victor Zask, who's the Manager of Healthy Eating, Active Living, Healthy Environments and Research and Evaluation Teams in Northern New South Wales Local Health District Health Promotion. This afternoon, Victor will guide us through a presentation on Survey Shmurvey, the ins and outs and roundabouts of survey design. To officially get us started, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters where we work and live. We acknowledge the traditional custodians' living culture, their connection to country and their contribution to the life of the regions we're joining from today. We pay our respects to the ancestors and elders of the regions and all Aboriginal people past, present and future, and to any Aboriginal people that may be joining us today. So welcome everyone. Just a little bit about the Rural Research Collaborative Learning Network. If you don't know, we're a large connected network spanning a large proportion of New South Wales, including 10 New South Wales local health districts, the Health Education and Training Institute, and also New South Wales Ambulance. We also reach into Queensland, involve a number of organisations there, including several hospital and health services, and that we've found that we comms going far and wide, and we've got people joining far and wide from other states, territories, and even other countries. So wherever you're joining from today, welcome. For those of you that have missed any of the previous sessions or want to review any of the content, we record all of the seminars we do on the CLaN. We upload them to the CLaN YouTube channel. And so you can access that channel using the link on the slide there, and we'll make sure that we share a copy of the presentation slides with everyone that's registered for the session today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So given what we all anticipate to be quite a large audience, with asking everyone to keep their microphones muted, but feel free to ask questions throughout the seminar using the chat function, and we'll endeavour to answer them if we get to them. Otherwise, we'll open the floor if we have time at the end of the presentation to answer some live questions. But please do ask questions. We encourage everyone to do so. And like I mentioned, if we have a little bit of time towards the end of the presentation, we'll open the floor up for live questions. Now, without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Victor Zask, who is currently the Manager of Healthy Eating, Active Living, Healthy Environments and Research and Evaluation Teams in Northern New South Wales LHD Health Promotion. Victor has been a Health Promotion Officer, Research and Evaluation Officer and Coordinator and Manager in the service. He is also recently appointed to the Chair of the North Coast New South Wales Human Research Ethics Committee. Victor has led several large-scale grant-funded evaluations of health promotion projects on a broad range of health issues like physical activity, healthy nutrition in preschools and schools, harm reduction for teens, health staff smoking, and exploring the link between cannabis and tobacco use. The findings of these evaluations have been published in over 30 papers in peer-reviewed journals, and most of them have included the use of surveys. So Victor, over to you. I'll continue sharing and just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. I might just wait until the slides appear.
Just bear with me. So I didn't realize I've stopped sharing for some reason. There we go.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So if you can go to, I think it's slide number 9 now. Yeah, so the next slide, please.
Yep, all good.
Yeah.
There we go.
So I'll just start with, so welcome everyone, and thank you, Alex, for the introduction. And I will go straight into the learning objectives of today's presentation. So the first one is to increase participants' ability and confidence to design effective survey instruments, increase your knowledge of the stages of survey instrument design, and then I'd also like to critically appraise Centre's survey. I know we're only 2.5 months away from Christmas, and Centre does send a population-wide survey mainly targeting kids. You may not know about it, but we'll get to it and we'll critically appraise it or look at it. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to clarify what I'm talking about when I'm talking about survey. So this is the dictionary definition of the verb to survey. And yes, that's a dictionary's example with the green eyes. And it does sound very James Bond or Mills and Boons for those who still remember this genre. And I'm not talking about that process. Next slide, please. In this presentation, I wanted to say that yes, survey can be used as a verb, but also as a noun, as in survey instrument, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So it can refer to both the questions and the processes related to participant recruitment, data collection, analysis, and reporting. And today we're only going to talk about the survey instrument. So next slide, please. So in this presentation, yeah, I said that the orange survey is the census, which is one of the most familiar surveys in Australia. I've also shown a pictorial survey that is used with kids, but you can see that the function of both instruments is similar, that is to collect data in a written form. Next slide, please. So next slide is calling on you to please write in the chat examples of surveys you have encountered in the last few weeks, whether it's at work, on social media, or anywhere else when you walk into a shop or an airport or whatever. So if you can chat, type now into the chat some examples of surveys that you have encountered in the last few weeks. Doctor's Clinic, yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, everyone. So as you can all see, surveys are everywhere in our lives. And they are used actually some surveys in private health professionals clinics, not only doctors, but allied health and sometimes sort of so-called alternative health practitioners. Yeah, they just make me chuckle because they're so badly designed when I go in as a customer and need to fill in these surveys. But as you can, this is the curse of having designed many surveys over the years. But key areas that you've mentioned are basically market research. So this is before a product goes to market, but this is someone just did something about Airbnb review, I think. So yeah, that's a very good example of market research. Basically, people wanting to get feedback on people's satisfaction with accommodation. They are widely used in health and medical fields. So this is to collect patient histories, assess patient satisfaction with care, and also study health-related behaviors and perceptions. And similarly in behavioral social sciences, so to explore and describe human behavior, to understand public opinion, and investigate social phenomena like, for example, stress or attachment. Obviously, they're very big in education. We all heard about NAPLAN, I think. And government and public sector, I just showed the census before. That's a great example. And that, of course, informs policy making. It also helps to administer programs and understand societal needs. And human resources also do surveys. All of us have been recruited by the health sector at some stage, the Ministry of Health or other organizations that you might be working at, and you know how many sort of surveys you need to fill in when you're on the recruitment journey. Now, I would like to say also to add that pretty much when we talk about evidence-based medicine or healthcare, pretty much all evidence, especially in behavioral sciences and medical fields, is really collected by surveys. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Alex. This is an example from that. This is the first example of data derived from surveys. So this is pre-election opinion polls from the last election. And you're probably very familiar with those, and they are the most familiar form of political science surveying. And if you can go to the next one, Alex, and this is about, if you can go to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry, one above. Yeah, this is from a site called Health Stats. It's a New South Wales health statistics, and this is from a population health survey. As you can see, it's a survey that's collecting data every year from all LHDs, and this particular example is about physical activity in adults. So this is statistics from the last 23 years. And as I said, they're collected in annual population health surveys, which the New South Wales Centre for Population Health is running. So as we can see, surveys are just everywhere. So the first thing to do when you start designing a survey is to, if you can go to the next slide, please, Alex. Yeah, to clarify the aim of your survey. And to do this, what could help you the most, if you can go to the next slide, please, is basically ask, what do we want to know? And it really does help to articulate the aim and objectives of a survey by asking ourselves, what do we want to know? And there could be a number of things that you might want to know, just like this lovely student here shouting at the principal. Can you please go to the next slide? This is an example. You can see a real case study from health promotion with how we worded the goal. Underneath it was one of the main things we wanted to know, which is where we started with. So we wanted to know, has participation in the program resulted in increased protective behaviors? This was for year 11 students, so 17-year-olds, 16, 17-year-olds. And when they participated in the program, when they reported the behavior 5 months later, has participation resulted in increased protective behaviors? That we wanted to know this. So that led to us then wording the goal or the objective, which is to evaluate the impact of the risk program on local year 11 students' knowledge, attitude, and behaviors. That wasn't the only thing we wanted to know, but this is just one example of how it works. So I can't emphasize this enough, really. If this is the one takeaway message from today's presentation, always go back to what do I want to know, and that will help you often in deciding what to include and what to exclude in your survey, because you need to ask yourself, do I really want to know this? So next slide, please. So now I want you to write in the chat aim or aims or objectives of a survey that you have recently worked on or are currently working on, or that you might be planning to work on soon. And think, so if you can think, what do I really want to know? What do I want to know? And then write the aim of the objective of the survey from what you want to know. So if you can do this in the chat for the next few minutes, that'll be great. Don't rush it. Yeah, and when people write things very generally, like consumer feedback, sorry for highlight it, maybe get a bit more specific. What exactly do you want to know from your consumers? Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great. I'm seeing some very specific goals, objectives there. Yeah, yeah. So we don't have much time to dwell on it, but I wanted to get you to think that way because often people say, oh, let's run a survey. And I think it's important to first think about what do we want to know and whether survey might be the best method or not. This is probably beyond the scope of this presentation. But let's say that you've decided that the survey is the right method for you. I think it's very important to ask what do we want to know and then drill down to quite a lot of specifics. So, and I can see some very, very good objectives up there. Yeah, so with Daniel, sorry, I'm picking up on you, Daniel, because Daniel's a colleague of mine. uh, what type of programs people want to see delivered? So I suppose you know it, but you might want to write what type of programs, because you work for Aboriginal Health. I suspect it's Aboriginal people say in the Tweed area want to see delivered by such and such team. So you can make it very specific, and that will help you to then drill down to the type of survey you will use. Can I go to the next slide, please? So I just wanted to mention that while surveys are more commonly used in quantitative research and evaluation, they often contain open-ended questions, which may be collecting qualitative data. And conversely, qualitative research sometimes includes sometimes brief surveys with closed questions that are used then to gather demographic and other relevant data regarding participants' characteristics. So, for example, before a focus group is run or an interview starts, uh, the researchers or evaluators might collect some by paper or online some data from the participants just to be able to describe that group. So I'm not going to get into the whole discussion of qualitative or quantitative and the choice of your research method, because that's a whole different presentation. But let's say you have deemed the use of survey as an appropriate method for your research project, then it's good to know that it can be used both in qualitative and quantitative contexts. I thought that's important to mention. And just on going back to objectives, I'll just mention some common objectives or purposes for using questionnaire and surveys. One is collecting feedback, so obtain feedback on services, products, or experiences. The other one is gathering data from a large number of respondents. So as I mentioned before, a lot of evidence comes from it. So you saw some physical activity data, and this shows you what happens at the population level. You can use surveys to understand attitudes, to measure people's attitudes, opinions, and emotional even responses to specific topics. You can use surveys for descriptive and analytical research. So you can describe characteristics of a population or analyze patterns and relationship within the data collected. And of course, you can use surveys to basically test the efficacy of treatments or interventions. So if we in health promotion run a program, we want to know whether it had an impact on, say, engagement in physical activity or nutrition among kids. So I remember analyzing data from lunch boxes in preschools, and following our programs, we could see that it had an effect on, say, parents' confidence to pack healthier lunch boxes. So that is an example of how we can use surveys, or what we can use surveys for. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Alex. So there are a number of administration considerations when you administer a survey. So more and more surveys are done online, but some people, for example, older people or those with no internet connection or sufficient credit, may prefer paper surveys still. And I'm sure some of you as health workers know a lot about that, and your clients may not be suitable for them to do an online survey. So hybrid administration is also possible, with some surveys done online and others on paper. So some of your clients may prefer paper and some are comfortable with online. And what you do then is you use an online platform like RedCap or Engage or Quaz, and then the data from paper surveys can be later entered and added by the researchers into the main data file, which was compiled by the online platform. And next slide, please. So the next step that I want to look at when designing a survey. So remember, you were all very good at setting up the objective of your survey. And of course, to do this, it helps to ask, what do we want to know? And again, I am putting it again at the top here. What do we want to know? When you come to a survey, if you decided that your objective, yes, someone put there, I'm just looking randomly at one of the last objectives put there. Has my program increased confidence in cooking skills? So Leslie was quite clear what they want to know in terms of the survey. And then you probably need to define what are some of the broad question areas. So before we do this, it's a bit of a, you probably all know it, but I just wanted to ask, what type of questions typically appear at the beginning of a survey? If people can put that in the chat. In surveys that you've seen or that you've administered. Yeah, name, age, demographics. Yeah. It's true that demographics are most commonly the first type of questions that appear there. I just wanted to say, yes, so name, age, gender, sometimes education, sometimes employment. Yeah, sorry, consent. I won't get into a discussion about the consent and patient information sheets and the consent process. We need to assume for this presentation that all this has been done before the survey is even administered. So today I'm just looking at the survey instrument purely at that, but it's true. So for those of you who said consent, good on you for considering it. But within the survey instrument, it is true that most people Yeah, also identifying eligibility if that's an issue for a study. But yes, demographic is the most common category of questions, demographics. And I just wanted to qualify this a little bit by saying that some researchers prefer to put demographics further down when a survey covers quite sensitive information. So, for example, a survey about drug use or mental health issues. So sometimes researchers prefer to build some rapport and trust with a respondents by asking sort of easy to answer questions in the beginning, and then they ask later about age and gender and um, whatever previous health issues and all that sort of stuff. But it is true that the vast majority of surveys start with demographics. And as you can see here in Santa's visit application, he too starts with applicant's details. So I think that's starting with name, where do you live? Of course, he's getting into other territory. Have you been a good boy or a girl? That's not demographics, but the first two questions are demographic questions. All right, so so I wanted to then say that what we do is we select broad question areas. So we can say these are the question areas that we want in a survey, and I'll show them in a couple of minutes how they are set in different surveys. And then we need to determine type of questions, whether they're open, closed, or both. Open questions can sometimes give you much more insight, but they do require a lot of analytical work at the back end of it. And if you survey a large number of people, they're not always practical, but they can be very, very useful. You then write specific questions, and we'll talk more about writing questions in a few minutes. But yes, simple and shorter is better, and single focus questions only. We'll talk about this in a while, and I will show you some examples. And it's very, very advisable to use existing or validated instruments or questions. So what I mean by that is that some researchers may have already done some research in this field, and they may have validated the instrument. And if you choose a validated instrument, you'd be able to compare your findings with others, and you'd also be more certain that your survey measures what it is supposed to measure. So validity in lay terms means that the survey measures what it is supposed to measure. And can you please go to the next slide, Alex? So I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent and give a very brief overview of validity and reliability. And I have to say that these topics require a whole presentation to do them justice. Some undergraduates spend a whole term on them, but I thought I would just touch on them briefly here because I mentioned validated instruments and items. And I do strongly recommend that you look at validated items or whole instruments when you are generating questions. So you might not pick up the whole Kessler distress scale, for example, which those of you from behavioral sciences probably know about it. But if you only have room for two questions, you might want to use their wording just because they've used it so many times. So So just, again, I said what validity is about accuracy and reliability is about consistency. So if you go back to validity, it's how well a survey instrument measures what it's supposed to measure. So validating a physical activity engagement survey might be compared to heart rate monitor data. And I just want to, I'll give an example which is might illustrate those. So say um, a team, an ACAT team, go to assess someone's eligibility for care package, all right? So they obviously have a protocol. They have some sort of a very involved, it's not just one survey, it's probably a whole battery of tests and assessment forms. So if those assessment forms, I'm not saying that they are, but let's just pretend that they were done very badly, and they're not valid and not reliable, they'll be all over the place. So they're not measuring what they're supposed, this is the target in the middle there. At A, if you're looking at exhibit A, they're not valid and not reliable. Now, if they are measuring what they're supposed to measure, for example, a person's frailty and eligibility for a care package or home care package, and all the nurses or OTs are using it, they're they're in the vicinity of the construct, like they're measuring what they are supposed to measure. But as you can see, every one of them is a bit off to another side. So they're not consistent between them. This is called inter-rater reliability, if you wanted to get very technical. If you go to C, this shows you something interesting. So the instrument they're using is not very good at assessing whether someone is frail, but they're good. It's a good team. They're all similar to each other, day in, day out, repeatedly, or between themselves. And when you go to D, that's the holy grail. It's both valid and reliable. So that was a quick tour de force of validity and reliability. Those of you who are more interested in it can go to other sources. But my point is that using validated instruments, if it suits your objective, or even items from validated instruments, is a good practice. Next slide, please. So I'm going back to what do we want to know. And as I said, we use existing questions or instruments, especially validated ones, and then we format for clarity. So it's important to include headings on each category of questions. And also,
I wonder if Mark did not know. I sent him an email that afternoon.
Someone has the mic open, and I can hear some.
I've just muted them.
Conversation.
So
yeah, thanks.
Hopefully we're okay now.
Yeah, and then we can also use filtering statements. So if you can go to the next slide. So you can see in Santa's visit application how we use headings, how he has used headings. Or maybe it's Santa's little helpers who help him with designing the surveys. I don't know, but you can see that's demographics, applicant details. And there's a question about, there's a number of questions of have you been good, using some sort of a rating scale. Then there is access details. Then there is placement, gift placement details, refreshment details, like what sort of booze you would be leaving for Santa. And then there's a declaration. So it's very clear. And normally what you do with those headings, you format them in slightly larger or bold font. And it makes it very clear for the person who fills in the survey. And when you look at filtering statements, this is a good example. So there's a question, do you have a chimney? Yes. And if you do, you go, when was it last swept? But if you don't, then there's another action there. You leave the back door or large window ajar. Now, you've probably seen it in surveys. Online surveys are very good at it with filtering questions. So if someone says, say if there's a health survey about your whatever, medical history, and it says, oh, what gender are you? And then, you know, if you, although, sorry, this is a fraught area, but I will go there anyway, because that's an example that came into my head. But if you say male, then it can filter the questions or jump and avoid the questions about pregnancy or about menstruation or whatever. So that's the meaning of filtering statements. When you say yes or no, then the yes leads you to certain areas and no leads you to another or jumps you. And in paper form, we used to do it with arrows or just with very clear instructions. With online surveys, it becomes much easier to do. Next slide, please. That's an example of single focused questions. So yeah, I'll just give you a few seconds to read it. And this is out of, you're already getting a glimpse of a very good resource that we are going to put in the chat at the end of the presentation. And that's a fantastic guide to survey design. And this is from it. I've just copied it from there. So next slide, please. So this is a bit we are going to look at again, as I said, what do we need to know? But before we look at the content of this slide, I wanted to highlight a couple of points about formatting. As you can see, there is a mix of 3 and 5 point rate questions here, but it is done in one table, which I like because it's quite economical. On this one, I would make sure that the 3-point rate questions lead the respondent to only use 3 points. So what I mean by this, next to was the amount of information presented, it's not clear enough, I think, to the respondent whether to circle the too little or just right or too much, or whether to put a cross or a tick in between them. So Alex, can you please go to the next slide? So as you can see now, I've added some instructions there which make it very clear to the respondent. And I can guarantee you that there will be respondents who don't follow this, but that's okay. I ask them to circle and not to use any of the blank spaces, but you minimize errors in interpreting data or unclarities in data collected. So the other thing I wanted to highlight is that you can see that emojis can be used to lighten things up and help illustrate the extremes in rating scales. So I like using humor, which can increase the response rate, I think. However, you need to consider how you would analyze the data. So for a process evaluation of how enjoyable a training was, I think using the words ecstasy with a smiley or agony with a anti-smiley is quite fun. It's fun and fine. But for an evaluation of mental health and well-being following mothers who have had post-birth depression, postnatal depression, postpartum depression, you might use a validated instrument, which I'm pretty sure is likely to use a term like very depressed and very happy as the extreme. So it's a bit of a play. You can decide whether to use those sort of emojis or not. Of course, for children's For children's surveys, that's a whole different kettle of fish, which is why it's important to use validated instruments and see what, or at least look at how they've structured it and take some examples from how they did it, how they communicated with kids. So what I want to do now is to, if you can go to the next slide, and we're going to have a poll, two polls, one following each following each other. So in the chat in a minute, Zoe will put a poll which will ask you from the previous, oh, how will we do it? Sorry, can you go back up? Oh, yes. No, they're already, it's okay. The questions are there. So what questions would you drop to make your survey more succinct? If I've asked you. So you can, don't answer in the chat, just answer in the poll and submit it, and then go to the next poll, which asks you why you have selected those. And Zora, I'm not sure how to make the view of the poll itself of the results. Oh, well, we'll wait. We'll look at it in a minute.
It should really pop up. Yeah, sorry, Zoe.
Yeah, it'll just pop up.
If people
oh, you can see it. Great. As long as you can see it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to see it too. All right. And then if you can go to the second poll, because I put view poll and all I see is the, oh yeah, great. Yeah, so some people said basically it's about relevance. That's the main. So I think people got the gist of it. It is about relevance, but it all goes back to that question that you've asked at the beginning. You know, what do I need to know, and do I need to know all those things? So if you are going to, I imagine that the room temperature is something that is better done in real time, not to wait until the end. So you can figure this out. But if it's, and also there's some redundancy in the questions themselves. Do you need to know, if you want to know that people got quite engaged and it was fun, it was a fun workshop, again, you can use emojis, but maybe you don't then need the interesting. Because if you have how enjoyable and how useful it is, or how interesting and how useful it was, do you really need to know another question, do you really need to collect data about enjoyability, and what would you do with this data? Don't you have enough in terms of engagement? So I would urge you to think very carefully about those things before you put them in survey instruments. All right, so if we can go to the next slide. So I just wanted to go through some common rating and Likert questions. So when you write rating questions, think whether the categories can really differentiate between levels. So for example, how would you interpret in analysis, when you analyze the data, the difference between moderately and slightly important? So some surveys use more specific frequencies, which I'll show you in a minute. For example, daily, weekly, monthly, less than monthly. Some researchers even use the agreement questions, which is, but that's a definition of a Likert question or Likert scale, is those normally 5 or 7 point items which go from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So if you can go to the next slide, Alex. And this is about using agreement Likert items for other constructs. So for example, the question that we had before, how important for me being physically active, you can word it as how strongly do I agree or disagree with this statement that it is important to me. Similarly, you can use agreement rates to the quality of the equipment used in the exercise group. So you can, there's no right or wrong, but I just wanted to highlight that you really do need to think of your categories on a rating sort of a question. And often they're very difficult to tell apart. So you need to think about it. This is a good example of a frequency question. So this is from the National Drug Strategy Household Survey. And you can see that there are 4 frequency categories for current use, and then other categories for past usage or for people who have never vaped. This is about vaping, this question. So you can see how it works and how important it is to A, be specific, yeah, and B, I can't even remember what I was going to say there, but it's very important to think in advance. Yeah, that's my B, to think in advance. How would you analyze these sort of data that you collect? So next slide, please. Okay, this is a frequency scale. So it's an example of a 4-point, well, every item here has 4 points of frequency, from always to never, and then 2 in between. And as you know now from before, one critique of this could be that it's not as specific or as saying daily, weekly, monthly, less than monthly. But nevertheless, this is, and you can build a scale from it. So this is from a survey that we ran with teens, and we had 13 items. I think here there's only 7 or so questions. There's a second page to it, which I won't show here. And there are basically 2 constructs here. There is protective behaviors and risky behaviors. So what you do is sum up the answers to all the protective behaviors, and they create a scale. And there's a whole world out there about analysis of those of these data and why they do or do not create a validated instrument. All right, so the next one. This is just an example of creating a Likert scale. This one is only 2. I had more questions, but I just put this so you can see. So basically it all works from strongly agree to strongly disagree, 1 to 7. And again, this is about intention to behave in certain ways. And there were, from memory, there were 4 or 5 questions in this scale. So just to reiterate, when you say, oh, I use the Likert scale, one question is technically a Likert question or a Likert item, and the collection of those items together becomes a Likert scale. But to be honest, a lot of people confuse the two, and it's okay as long as you use them properly. So the next slide, please. So looking at question types, content areas, those are typical content areas, demographics, feedback regarding participation. We talked about this. Knowledge tests are often used. Message recall is very important. This is used a lot in marketing, or in social marketing. So those of you remember the slip, slop, slap, when it was running, the Cancer Council did a message recall test. They will call people and ask them, do you record it? That's unprompted. And, oh, yeah, I know it was slip, slop, slap. Or I know it was slip, slop something. So that's unprompted. Or if it's prompted, like, do you recall the slip, slop, slap? So that's a message recall, attitude, beliefs, values, and reported behavior or intended action, which we've seen a few examples of. And format is you can use rating and Likert items and scales. We talked about it. You can use multiple choices. That's a very easy one to collect data and analyze. To your right, there's an interesting one. When you get this, you can go to the Math Nerds website and look at this. Multiple choice, there's no question, but you can actually, with logic, determine which answer is the correct answer. So multiple choice, this is just a fun thing to do after the presentation. And of course, you can use open-ended or text fields. Next slide, please. So in terms of the survey development and administration process, I think Zoe is about to put a link to a really excellent survey design resource in a short while. If Riley is in the audience, Riley's put it together and she's done a great job. So good on you, Riley. It covers everything in this presentation and much more, and you can work through it when you design a survey instrument next time. And I think it really does help to check other well-established surveys, and it can ensure that your findings are valid and also that your questions are worded according to the latest definitions and language. So for example, when we did the survey with students, I looked at the ABS census questions about gender because I thought it's a fraught area, and if I use the ABS definitions, they have much more resources to think it through. So, all right. So, going back to this slide, so what you do is you clarify the aim of your survey, as we said before. You search literature for validated instruments. You ask colleagues within and outside your unit those questions. That's really important, and we worked through those in this presentation. You draft the survey. It's really important to pilot it, both with colleagues, and then you modify it if they give you feedback. And also it's important to pilot it with a target group and then modify it again. And then you are ready to administer a survey. And the next slide, please. And that is, where do I start? This is this resource that I talked about. It may not be available for people outside our LHD, so Zoe's going to put a PDF version of it in the chat, and you'll be able to then just follow it from the PDF, and it has all the links. So really, I think that's the end of my presentation. Alex, if you want to put the last slide on, and we might open it for, I don't know, what do we have? 4 or 5 minutes for Q&A.
There's time for a few questions. Thanks, Savigdor, for the very informative talk. There was one early on. I'm just scrolling through. It was from Dr. Paris, and Dr. Paris asked, does the order of response options, though from most positive to most negative, left to right, or vice versa, affect the accuracy of participants' input or influence their psychological response? So that's one question there for you, Victor.
Yes, it's quite a curly one, and the answer is that you probably need to look. There's a whole lot of psychometric literature about those sort of things, and again, it's a bit of a balancing act. In my surveys, sometimes I would reverse the items, and at times we found that inevitably some people just do it automatically and they don't read it well. So, you know, if the first item was say from positive to negative, and the second was positive to negative, and then the third was reversed, most people will pick up on it, but some, it looks like a few have just missed it because it just doesn't make sense. It's not consistent with the other answers. So I would highlight that you are changing the direction, or even highlight it at the top of the scale if you want to do this. I mean, another way of doing it, it depends on the context. If you're administering instruments repeatedly to say participants in a program, if it's an ongoing assessment, then you can even do a mirror assessment, one that is worded, you know, from left to right, and another one where the positive to negative is reversed, and see whether they are consistent. That's another type of reliability, I suppose. You do this, but it's a very complex question, actually, and I don't think there's an easy answer to it. But my experience is that I would make it very clear that the direction of questions changes, and that will keep them. Yes, it will make it, if it's a short enough survey, then I think it's fine. It just keeps them on their toes, and they need to focus and concentrate a bit more. And at least you know that you have eliminated this type of bias. But it comes at the price of possibly getting people who just do it on automatic pilot, which I know I do sometimes. If I go to a Facebook survey by a bank, and I say, oh yeah, I'll give them some data, but I just all do, oh yeah, 3, 4 for this, 3 for that, 5 for that. Yeah, I'm pretty satisfied, and it moves between pretty satisfied to very satisfied on different aspects. But if they were to reverse it, I probably wouldn't notice. So I hope that answered that question.
Bit of a curly one. I think we've got time for one more, and it might be another curly one. I know there's a few more questions in the chat. We won't get to them, but the question I found is from Will, and Will asked, do you have any recommendations about analysis of qualitative survey data, or what tools / guidelines to use to guide what analysis method is best?
Well, I think with qualitative data, especially written one, it does depend on your intentions. I mean, most qualitative research will not be done in a written form. So if you really want to elicit, you know, narrations, you know, narrative data from people, normally it's done through other methods. But say you have done something very in-depth in writing, then I think it all goes back into your research design. So in qualitative data, as you probably know, there's quite a lot of analytical frameworks, and whether you just want to do very straightforward thematic analysis, or whether you want to do, for example, grounded theory type of analysis, which will mean that you will collect data from a small number of people, then start getting some models or build some theories, and then you'll administer it to more people and change your theory or model as you go along. But it really, with what I've seen with surveys, because they're normally not as in-depth as other qual methods like focus groups or interviews or observational studies or, co-design sort of consultation processes. What I've seen with written surveys, normally it's done quite briefly and it's done in a quite straightforward thematic analysis. And of course, you can also use what we used here, which is just put them through some word cloud analysts, AI analysts, and that's interesting to see what are the main words that jump at you. But I would say straightforward thematic analysis would be the most obvious one.
So thank you very much, Avigdor. I'm just conscious of time, so
Yep.
just take the opportunity to thank you for the very informative talk and presentation. I'll close the session for today and just remind everyone, each of our learners, that we've got our final CLaN seminar planned for next month. And this will be by Dr. Zoe Michael. If some of you know Dr. Zoe, she's in fact probably the founder of the CLaN concept. And Zoe will be presenting your research tips for planning a poster to a plenary. That will be held on Wednesday, the 12th of November, 3 to 4 p.m. New South Wales time, or 2 to 3 p.m. Queensland time. So thank you everyone for your time today, especially you, Victor. Enjoy the rest of your afternoons, and hopefully we'll see you next month for Zoe's presentation. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.